March wrap-up. The first book I read was Unicorn Hunting by A.R. Hellbender, aka Roya, who is over at Unicorn Hunting Books. She sent me this book that she wrote to give it a review, and if you want my full thoughts on it, I do have a review up that I posted not long ago. I will link it up here somewhere above. And yeah, I really enjoyed it. It is a young adult coming of age fantasy where this girl, Cal, is a unicorn hunter, just like the title says. And it's a really cool, unique take on unicorns and girl power and all of those awesome things. And so I highly recommend you go check it out. Next, I reread Dark Triumph by Robin LaFevers, and this is the second book in his Fair Assassins trilogy. And it is just so wonderful. Like, I reread Grave Mercy last month, and even though I remembered that I really, really loved this trilogy, I didn't realize how much I loved it. And so once I finished Grave Mercy, I was like, I have to reread Dark Triumph, and it was so good. So Grave Mercy follows Ismay, and the second book, Dark Triumph, follows Sabella. And yeah, Sabella has a really dark past, and if you don't know the premise of this trilogy, it is that these are young women who are Death's handmaidens. Basically, they're nuns who are also assassins. And that's just always my selling point for this trilogy, because there really isn't a whole lot more, I personally feel like, for people to be interested. And there's a whole lot of girl power. There's really awesome romances. I really liked the romance in this book. A little bit more as well. There are some trigger warnings for abuse and sexual abuse, and so just to give you a heads up about that, but I thought it was really well done. It's such a great, great trilogy, and I can't wait to get to Mortal Heart, the third one. Next up is Written and Read by Anne Bishop. This is the first book in the Others series, and it's an urban fantasy, and this has been on my TBR for a really long time, and I've heard a lot of people talk about it and how it's so good and how I'm probably going to love it, and they were totally right. The way I see this book, it's kind of like an urban fantasy for people who don't like urban fantasy. Even though I know people who do enjoy that genre, I think you're really going to enjoy this book as well, because it definitely has all things that we love about the genre. But for people who don't really like it, I think they might appreciate this one, because it is longer. It's nearly 500 pages, and it's more based on world building and characters versus action and plot. Like, there is action and there is plot, so I don't want you to think that like nothing happens, but it's definitely more focused on the characters and the world building, which I just really, really love, because a lot of times that's my favorite part of urban fantasy. The premise is that there is Meg, and she is a blood prophet who has been locked up and hidden away her entire life, and now she's escaped, and she starts to work for the Others, who are supernatural creatures. They're pretty much animals who can shapeshift into humans, which I think is a really cool, very slight twist on it, because usually we see things like shapeshifters such as werewolves and stuff, and we consider like their human form as their normal form, and they just happen to be able to turn into animals. But this one definitely has the focus of where their more natural, normal form is whatever animal they happen to shapeshift into, and human is their secondary one, and they kind of just act as humans because it's beneficial to them to fit into society. But this one, you definitely get the feel of, holy crap, they're not human at all, and I loved that. So Meg starts to work for Simon, basically as the mail girl. There was an official title for it, but she's essentially just working in the post office. But I love their slow burn relationship, and I love the dynamic of the Others, kind of a little small town village type of feel, and it's really fun. And I just really, really love this book, and I need the next one right now. I read one of the most anticipated books of the year, and that is The Hate U Give by Angie Thomas. And this is definitely one of the best books I've read so far this year. This is definitely going on the list of books to beat for the year. And so I know a lot of you probably have heard about it, but in case you haven't, this is a young adult contemporary novel inspired by the Black Lives Movement. We have 16-year-old Star, and one day she's at a party, and as she's leaving the party, she gets a ride with an old friend from her childhood, and they end up getting pulled over, and her friend is shot by a police officer. And the book follows the aftermath of this event. And it is just such a great book. Like, Caitlin did a really, really awesome book review of that, so I will find a way to link her review. But Caitlin pointed out of how, like, you know this is going to be an important book because it's about the Black Lives Matter movement, and sometimes with these books that you know are going to be super important, you have this feeling of, okay, I'm just going to have to get through it because it's important. You definitely don't have that feel throughout The Hate U Give, because it's also super enjoyable the entire time. Like, you have these heart-wrenching moments, and you're thinking about the Black Lives Matter movement, and you're trying to put yourself into her shoes, and you're talking about different issues of race and poverty and all these really, really important things. But then you also have all the other contemporary things in a young adult contemporary book that you usually like the dynamics with her family, and I just love her relationship with her parents and with her siblings. And you also have things going on with her and her friends, and those dynamics of her trying to balance her home life and her school life, and how do those two cultures mix. And then there's this surprising, adorable love story with her and her boyfriend that I just loved that aspect of it. And of her trying to figure out what does she want to do with her life, and how does she want to be her true self. And it seems like there's going to be a whole lot going on in the book, but it's all woven seamlessly together where it's just life. And so it's so fantastic, and I cried a lot. Just to let you know, the rest of the books of the month, this is going to be a theme. I basically cried throughout, like, almost every book I read in March. So, like, The Hate U Give on, it kind of just set the premise of, oh, hey, Emily, you're just going to be a mess of tears all month. So, just to let you know, I probably should be, like, scaling these books on according to how many boxes of tissues I went through or something, but it's ridiculous. But yeah, please go pick up The Hate U Give by Angie Thomas, because it was phenomenal. I read The Year We Fell Down by Serena Brown. This is a new adult contemporary romance, and Kirsty had recommended this book on her channel once, and I was like, hey, that sounds really good. Do you know why it sounds really good? Because it's about a girl in a wheelchair, and she falls for this super swoony hockey player guy her first year in college. And basically she has paraplegia. She had an accident, which you learn about as the book goes on. You learn what happened to her, and she cannot walk, or she can walk to an extent using crutches and braces and such, but she's mainly in a wheelchair. And when she moves into her university, she's on the floor that has more the handicap accessibility, and across the hall is a hockey player. And she meets Hartley, who lives across the hall from her, and he has been injured in not in a hockey accident. Then there's also that story, which is pretty great, if I do say so myself. And he severely injured his leg, and he is out for the season, and he is on crutches for several months. And they form a friendship, and it was so cute. And it's definitely not the greatest love story I've ever seen, and her little hope fairy is really annoying, and it was kind of cliche at times, and there definitely is a couple of things with, like, some cheating, and I personally felt that the way that they handled it was fine, but I know for some people that's kind of like their thing, where they're like, I won't tolerate that at all. And so if that's a thing that really bothers you, you might not like this book that much. But it definitely I cried a lot, because I was able to really connect to it. It made me think a lot about the accessibility my college offered, or the lack of accessibility my college offered. And so that brought back a lot of memories, and it just brought back a lot of feelings that I've personally had. And I really connected to the main character, Corey, and her struggles, and I felt like it was a great job of, like, being honest with her struggles, but not really being like, oh my gosh, like, look at this victim. Like, it was just an honest story, and a lot of the story was her learning to accept who she is now and her life now. and that process, and that was really, really cool. And I could also relate to it because I haven't seen a whole lot of books where someone used both crutches and a wheelchair, and in my experience, I've had a mix of both walking and wheelchair use, and using like a walker and braces and crutches, and so I really liked that because I could connect to that a lot. And I loved Hartley. When you saw his perspective, I really love how he described her, because he never ignored that her wheelchair and her disability was part of who she was. But when he was describing her, he was like, oh, she was a pretty girl, not she was pretty even though she was in a wheelchair. She was just Corey, and she was just a pretty girl, and I loved that. And so I really, really enjoyed this book. Then I read Little Bee by Chris Cleave, and this was okay. I read it for a book club one of my friends has started, and I DNF'd the book for last year. Not fun. And I DNF'd last month's book, so I felt like I had to read the book this month. Otherwise, I probably would have DNF'd it. Like, I did enjoy it enough to finish it and not be like, oh, that was a waste of my time. And it's nothing that has to do with the book itself. It's just, it's a literary fiction, and I'm just learning more and more that I don't really enjoy literary fiction. And even though I appreciated what it was saying, it was a lot about immigration, and basically it takes place in the UK, and it goes back and forth between these two women's perspectives. One is Little Bee, and she is an immigrant from Nigeria, I believe, and she just came out of the detention center, and then she meets up with another woman that she met a couple years ago on a beach, and the whole marketing thing for this book is what happened when they met on the beach. Like, even on the back of the book, they're like, we want to tell you what happens, but we're not going to tell you what happens because that's the point. And which, like, I kind of get it, but at the same time, like, it built up what happened on the beach so much that I was kind of disappointed. Even though, like, it definitely was a big thing, and it definitely, I could see how it was a traumatizing thing, I just was kind of like, oh, that was it? Cool? And I kind of connected to the characters, but I didn't totally connect to the characters. And just, yeah, like, if you like literary fiction, you'll probably enjoy this book. But if you don't like literary fiction, you probably won't enjoy it. Then, I reread A Court of Thorns and Roses by Sarah J. Maas. And again, I cried a lot. Partly because I reread this almost immediately after I watched the new Beauty and the Beast movie. And yeah, so I was just all over the place, because I also cried like all throughout Beauty and the Beast because I'm ridiculous. And also just because this is the first time I reread this book since reading A Court of Mist and Fury, and so reading it through that lens, everything is different now. Oh my gosh, like, I was an emotional disaster. It was ridiculous, and I definitely picked up more of the actual plot this time, and not just the love story, so that was really cool. And I also paid attention to some of the other side characters, like her sisters, more, and that was really, really cool. And so I'm super excited to reread A Court of Mist and Fury, knowing everything here, being refreshed of all this, and I really want to get to it right away, but I'm holding back from the temptation because, yeah, I need to. I do think I still like the Throne of Glass series more than this series, and I feel like, at least with the people I talk to, I feel that's a little bit of an unpopular opinion, because most people I know are like super, super sad about this trilogy and not as much about the Throne of Glass series, which is fine. And I think it's mainly just because I don't connect to the characters quite as much as I do the Throne of Glass series. Like, especially Feyre. I like Feyre, it's not that I don't like her. It's just, I feel like, I don't know, something about her I don't connect to quite as much as I do the main character in Throne of Glass. So, but I'm still super excited to read A Court of Mist and Fury next, and then A Court of Wings and Ruin in May. It's going to be amazing. I also listened to Talking as Fast as I Can by Lauren Graham. This is her memoir, kind of talking about Gilmore Girls, a little bit about parenthood, but mainly Gilmore Girls and her experiences in acting and when she started and growing up and all of those fun things. And just audiobooks read by their narrators, especially if they're like celebrity memoirs, are just one of my favorite things ever. It's actually really, really short. It's only like 4 or 5 hours long. So it's actually a really short audiobook, and it was really enjoyable and fun, and it wasn't anything like earth shattering or life shattering. She talks about some of her writing a little bit, and I found that really interesting. And basically, it's like if you're a fan of Gilmore Girls, you're gonna like Talking as Fast as I Can. If you don't like Gilmore Girls, then you might not like it. You know, if you're a Parenthood fan, you might appreciate it too. I think I have heard of some people who like they became interested in Gilmore Girls because they read this book, but for the most part, like if you like Lauren Graham, you're going to like this book. I also read The Irresistible Revolution by Shane Claiborne, and this is actually the 10th year anniversary edition where he does some updates about more of some of his views now and how they changed, and also where his organization, The Simple Way, has come in the last 10 years since writing this book. This book was so great, and it was just perfect timing to read this book because it's all about social activism and faith and social activism. So, just a little theology nerd moment. So, the side of like the faith, the Christianity thing of like heaven and how do you get to heaven thing is justification. And this book is dealing with what's called sanctification. And that's the whole like, oh, I'm a Christian. I've got the whole heaven thing down. What do I do now? And so that's really what the focus of The Irresistible Revolution is. And it's just so awesome. And it's really like him saying like, hey, what if Jesus actually meant it when he was like, you need to lay down your life for other people, or love your neighbor as yourself? What if we actually did all of that? And it's really, really cool. And he's definitely like, he says everything so well and so respectfully, while at the same time calling out people on their BS. He really takes everything to heart in talking about social activism. And what's awesome about it too is that no matter where you are on the spectrum, whether you're like super, super conservative or you're like super, super liberal or somewhere in the middle, he gives you something to think about where he's like, hey, there's this, but what about this? And hey, there's this, but what about this? And so I highly recommend it for you, just if you really want to do more with social activism and faith and or just any of those things in general. I highly recommend reading this book. And he also gives you resources and like different websites and organizations to check out as well. And the final book I read for March was The Sun Is Also a Star by Nicola Yoon. I listened to this on audiobook, and I have been on the waiting list to get the audiobook from Overdrive since like December. So I was super excited when it finally arrived. And holy crap, I did not expect this book to tear me apart and put me back together the way it did. Like, again, I cried the whole time. Like, I cried through A Court of Thorns and Roses. I cried through The Irresistible Revolution. I cried through The Sun Is Also a Star. I cried through The Year We Fell Down. And yeah, so The Sun Was Also a Star, like, I was a complete emotional disaster throughout the whole thing. The premise of this, it is a young adult contemporary, and we have two characters, Natasha and Daniel. We go back and forth between their two perspectives. Natasha is an undocumented immigrant from Jamaica, and Daniel's family is from South Korea, and it is the day Natasha's family is about to be deported, and she and Daniel's paths cross, and they end up falling in love in the course of a day, which is totally like the tropey insta love. You okay, can you really fall in love in a day? Which like is one of the things you definitely have to just go with it. But when you do just go with it, it's so freaking adorable, and I love it. And it also, you know, like has all these things with like immigration and race and like dealing with all that stuff, but it's also a super enjoyable read where it's really cute and this awesome little love story. And it also deals a lot with how people's lives are interconnected and how one person can touch one person's life without really realizing it. And throughout the book there's like interspersed little backstories for side characters and different like scientific things, because Natasha is very scientific, and so there's a lot of like scientific theory stuff in there. But then Daniel is a poet, so lots of stuff like that, and some of those intermission-y things, like I really, really liked them because it brought us a lot of insight and it really brought home the theme. But at the same time, sometimes I felt like I kind of interrupted the story. But overall, I really, really thoroughly enjoyed this book, and yeah, it destroyed me. And then it put me back together, and it destroyed me again, and over over again. And yeah, it was just a really delightful emotional roller coaster. Then I am currently reading Winter Song by S.J. Jones. I'm not even a quarter of the way through it, so I can't really give much of a review of how it is so far. But I'm reading Winter Song by S.J. Jones. You know, I thought my video was going to be shorter because I only read 10 books and not 17. But apparently I just have too many thoughts. But there's my wrap up for March. Let me know what you read. If you read any of these books, I want to hear your thoughts on them and what you read in March. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you later. Bye.